Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. So apologies to our patrons. I wasn't able to get this one to you a day in advance. Got some stuff going on in our family right now with a medical situation. Not my immediate family, but extended family. So I wasn't able to record yesterday as I originally planned. But we will be back with a new episode recorded for you to see 24 hours in advance tomorrow. So be watching for that. In the meantime, we're going to be diving into this one from our friends at Kings and Generals. This is Charlemagne's grandsons lost everything. This is how the early stages of what is now modern Europe began to form. It's why Germany and France developed as different nations instead of part of one big empire that Charlemagne had built. So I think it'll be a really interesting topic. It's an underrated part of European history. And I'll put the link down in the description so you can check out Kings and Generals without my commentary. Fantastic channel. That's why we take a look at them so often. I want to thank Nitro4086 and Ralph WK for your support on Patreon. Let's dive into this one. So I love this little note there at the bottom, and unfortunately this is the world in which we live now, right? Researched, written, edited, narrated, illustrated, and animated by humans, not AI.
It is the 3rd of July, 987. In the Cathedral of Rheims, Archbishop Adalbero anoints the head of the King of the Franks with the holy oil once used to crown Clovis, the first Catholic king of Francia.
So this is pretty cool because I know he pronounced it Rhymes, and in World War II a lot of soldiers pronounced it Reims, and it's probably more close in French to like Rhin or something like that, you know how the French are. But it's traditionally the place where French kings will be crowned for centuries and centuries, and it's where the Western allies received the surrender of the Germans at the end of World War II. And this, just to set context, we're talking about almost 200 years after Charlemagne is crowned Holy Roman Emperor or Emperor of Rome, or whatever the title was they used at the time, in the old St. Paul's Cathedral in what is now Vatican City.
For the Archbishop is Hugo Capet. With this ceremony, the reign of the Carolingians in the western part of Charlemagne's empire finally comes to an end. The descendants
and the Capetians are going to rule over France for centuries after this.
Of the Capetian dynasty, founded by Hugo Capet, would go on to rule what would become the Kingdom of France.
I think in France it's probably pronounced Capet.
With some interruptions until the 19th century, while other branches of the family would ascend to the thrones of many kingdoms throughout Europe.
So, yeah, we got a note right here. We've got Sicily and Naples, Hungary, Poland, Navarre, Portugal, Spain, and Luxembourg, all ruled by members of the Capetians at some point.
Such as Sicily, Naples, Hungary, Poland, Spain,
didn't know he was going to read it right after that. I figured since it was on the screen, it wouldn't be read.
And Portugal. Yet, every great success story has humble beginnings. In this video, we will trace the modest rise of the House of Capet, or the Robertines, and explain how this family secured one of the most prestigious thrones of the former Frankish Empire. To do so, we must examine the political developments in West Francia during the 9th and 10th centuries, and follow the gradual ascent of the Capetians, who rose to power as loyal servants and eventual rivals of the last Carolingian kings. Before we begin, it is important to note that both modern research and national historiographical traditions make this topic highly complex. Naturally,
that's just history, right? I mean, we try so hard to simplify it all, to make everything good guys and bad guys, make everything black and white. That is just not how life is. It's not how history is.
What now follows can only scratch the surface of the fascinating and turbulent late Carolingian world. Like his father, Charlemagne, before him, Emperor Louis the Pious attempted to preserve the unity of the Carolingian Empire, defying older Frankish traditions of partible inheritance, in which a realm was divided between the ruler's sons.
And this is why you see stronger national identities develop later on, the nations like France and England and things like that. It's when they stopped doing that. It's when they stopped dividing up the lands between all of the sons. It allowed for these stronger entities to continue to exist because it got passed down to one person. But it also then leads to a number of dynastic struggles for that power.
According to Louis's wishes, his eldest son, Lothar, was to serve as co-emperor and principal heir.
Which is ironic because Lothar's territory is the one that ends up being the odd man out in all of this with Lotharingia.
While his younger brothers would rule autonomous sub-kingdoms that owed fealty to Lothar. Thus, formally, the empire would remain united under the Carolingians. In practice, none of Louis's sons were satisfied with this arrangement. Beginning in 830, Emperor Louis faced repeated rebellions by his sons and discontented nobles. When he died in 840, the Carolingian Empire descended into open civil war.
So we're 40 years after the crowning of Charlemagne in Rome.
As each heir sought to secure and expand his share of the inheritance. The conflict shook the foundations of imperial authority and exposed deep structural weaknesses within the Frankish state. In 843, the Treaty of Verdun formally divided the empire between the three surviving sons. Louis the German received the eastern lands, Lothar the Middle Kingdom, and Charles the Bald the western portion. A second treaty in 870 reinforced the east-west divide.
Sorry Lothar, you're gone, so your territory gets split up among everybody else.
The Kingdom of Italy emerged as a separate entity. Over time, repeated partitions created as many as 6 Carolingian kingdoms.
It's worth noting there that there is, for a time, a Kingdom of Italy, which, Italy doesn't reappear as a united kingdom until the 19th century. But it does kind of exist at this time. And if you look at the modern map, the only thing we're really missing in this part of Europe then as a major state is eventually where we'll get Switzerland in the midst of all that. Yes, we have little ones, but Luxembourg, and then eventually up here you're going to have the Netherlands. But for most of history, the next 1,000 years, you're starting to look at the early stages of what will become Germany and France and Italy,
ruled by a different branch of the dynasty. Historians point to a variety of causes for the empire's long decline. In simplified terms, the division of the empire meant the division of land, wealth, and authority. Kings increasingly depended on the loyalty of powerful magnates, which they secured by granting permanent lands, offices, and rights. At the same time, all Carolingian realms faced relentless external pressure. Viking, Slavic, Muslim, and later Magyar raids devastated the kingdoms and drained royal resources.
Yeah, think about, you're constantly not only trying to keep stable your own kingdom by keeping your subordinates happy and pacified, and then you've got to worry about whether it's the Muslims down in the Iberian Peninsula or in far east, southeastern part of Europe. Or you've got to deal with other Christian rulers or other non-Christian rulers that are in Europe, like the Vikings. And, there's just constant threats from without and from within. It's a lot for anybody to manage.
These pressures transformed how the empire was governed. Under Charlemagne and Louis the Pious, royal authority strove for a centralized system that closely supervised key regions and appointed officials who ensured the enforcement of royal rule and decrees.
You have to have that. You have to have people you can trust who are going to enforce things locally. You can't possibly, from one central location like Aachen, rule an entire empire effectively.
But this system did not survive the civil wars and external pressures that bore down upon the empire after Louis's death. The mechanisms for raising troops and administering justice gradually collapsed, and control over distant regions was delegated to local elites.
And you have different ways in which that's happening too. We took a look at the video talking about what feudalism actually looked like during this period, and it looks different in different places and at different times.
Late Carolingian kings found it increasingly difficult to intervene in local affairs. In response, nobles demanded high rewards for their support. Counties, abbeys, and churches passed from royal control into the hands of powerful families. Even royal officials, such as the counts and missi dominici, began prioritizing their own local interests. Cultural, linguistic, and legal differences between the emerging kingdoms and sub-kingdoms further encouraged fragmentation and fostered strong regional identities.
Yeah, this is no different today, right? Here in the United States, you have a lot of people who very much identify more with their local region or their state rather than the entire nation. And that's one of the reasons that we ended up with a civil war, is that you had an entire third of the country who wanted to break off and form their own country because they felt like the rest of the country just didn't share their values or their beliefs or their views on things like slavery, and they just didn't want to be a part of it. And so you've got these local magnates who just care so much more about their own local problems. They're not worried about whether they're a part of West Francia or Lotharingia or East Francia or fighting against the Muslims or fighting against the Magyars or whoever else, the Vikings that might come along, unless they show up in their own territory.
Beginning in the late 9th and fully in the 10th centuries, West Francia increasingly resembled a realm dominated by powerful princes, rather than the centralized kingdom that Charlemagne might have hoped to establish. Yet the consecrated Carolingian king remained a crucial symbolic figure. Authority still flowed, at least nominally, from the crown, and magnates derived legitimacy from royal appointment. At the same time, the late Carolingian period saw a renewed mobility among the aristocracy. Noble families moved between the emerging kingdoms in search of opportunity, refuge, or advantage. One such family would later become known as the Robertines, the ancestors of the Capetians. The Robertines likely originated in East Francia, with early influence around the city of Worms. It is possible that they even had family ties to the Carolingian main branch, but nothing hard can be said in that regard. After falling out of favor with East Francian king Louis the German, the family appears to have moved westward into the West Frankish Empire.
And you can do this at this point, right? Because they're still nominally kind of all part of the same larger realm, the kingdom of the Franks, and they're all still part of what Charlemagne established. And the division's not to the point where they feel like different countries yet. They're getting there.
Their first prominent figure of that family to make his renown was Robert the Strong, who emerged in the sources in 852, when King Charles the Bald granted him several abbeys and royal offices.
Who's very clearly not bald in that image.
Despite rebelling against the king in 858, Robert regained royal trust, and in 861 was appointed military commander of the March of Neustria. He received the counties of Anjou, Touraine, and Blois. Over the next decade, Robert proved himself a capable defender against Viking raids and became a pillar of West Frankish defense. Before his death fighting the Vikings at the Battle of Brissath in 866, he had expanded his influence into Burgundy and acquired lands in Maine, Anjou, and Tours. However, these holdings were not yet hereditary. After Robert's death, many of his offices and lands were redistributed by the crown. Still, he had established his family as a major force in West Francia. Robert's son, Odo, continued this rise. He assumed control of the county of Paris in 882, and soon gained fame during the Great Viking Siege of the city in 885. Odo successfully held Paris until Emperor Charles the Fat arrived in 886 and negotiated the Vikings' departure through tribute, a well-established Carolingian strategy.
Right, and that's going to work up until they finally say, you know what, let's just give you some land in what becomes Normandy in order to get them to stop continuing to raid.
In recognition of his valiant defense of Paris, Odo was rewarded with offices and counties his father had once held. Control over key territories near Orléans and the Abbey of St. Martin of Tours made him one of the most powerful magnates in the kingdom.
So we see kind of the long game being played here, right? I mean, things didn't happen overnight for this family. It didn't happen from one generation, even though, the influence is built, nothing is passed on. So it's the long game, and it's kind of the slow changing of your stars, as they would say in A Knight's Tale, which is a fantastic movie that I love. Not a historic one, but a good one nonetheless. But Odo's going to continue that path, and then eventually you're going to see the generations carry this full-throated into a kingdom of their own.
As with his father before him, his rise was driven not by rebellion, but by loyal service to the crown. But a turning point came in 888, when Charles the Fat died childless after being deposed of his crown under pressure from Arnulf of Carinthia, who was crowned ruler of East Francia by its nobles. With Arnulf focused on his own eastern realm, Otto was elected King of West Francia, the first non-Carolingian to hold the throne.
And you can only imagine how different things might have been had there been an heir born that was of the Carolingian dynasty. Could that have continued? Because for centuries afterwards, people are going to still trace their ancestry back to Charlemagne as a way of establishing their own legitimacy. So imagine if you could be his actual biological heir in that family and could have held it together.
Despite his coronation, Otto faced the same structural limits as his Carolingian predecessors. His real power was confined largely to his own lands, and he depended on the cooperation of other princes. To secure his position, he acknowledged Arnulf of Carinthia as his superior. Otto did achieve further military successes against the Vikings.
So he's acknowledging that now because he has to, but allow the power balance to change a little bit, and he doesn't necessarily probably feel the need to continue to acknowledge that.
Legitimizing his rule, though often at great personal risk. His brother, Robert, became one of his chief supporters, receiving the March of Neustria, multiple counties, and numerous abbeys as lay abbot.
Yeah, that's impressive because a lot of times the brother is after the same thing. And, to get your brother on your side and to reward him handsomely for it, that's a loyalty that, there's not enough you could promise in order to gain that kind of loyalty.
This concentration of ecclesiastical wealth became a defining feature of Robertian power and alarmed other magnates. Yet the Carolingian line was not extinguished. Charles the Simple, the posthumous son of Louis the Stammerer, had been passed over due to his youth.
These are not great nicknames that inspire confidence, right? Louis the Stammerer, Charles the Simple.
Educated under Archbishop Fulk of Reims, Charles became the figurehead of an opposition movement when Otto clashed with the Counts of Flanders in the early 890s. After years of conflict, a compromise was reached in 895. Charles received the city of Lyon and recognition as heir to the Kingdom of West Francia. When Otto died childless in 898, his brother Robert honored the agreement and supported Charles' accession to the West Frankish crown.
Got to give a lot of credit to Robert. Stays loyal to his brother, honors the agreement his brother made, even though this would be a prime opportunity to rise up and claim it for yourself.
In return, Charles confirmed Robert's offices and, crucially, allowed him to pass them on to his son, making a first step in making them fully hereditary and separating them from royal approval.
So again, playing the long game, right? Not going for short-term glory or power for yourself, but playing the long game for your bloodline.
As with the other late Carolingian rulers, Charles the Simple also struggled to control the realm, lacking royal possessions and other assets. Meanwhile, Robert remained loyal and successfully fought the Vikings, remaining an important asset of Carolingian rule. Most prominently, Robert defeated the Viking leader Rollo in 911, who was then granted the county of Rouen, laying the foundation for
Normandy.
the famous Duchy of Normandy, whose ducal line would conquer Anglo-Saxon England some 150 years later.
It's all tied together, right? History is all tied together, and you see how one layer and one domino falling just connects to the next to the next.
Despite Robert's loyal service to the West Frankish crown, tensions between the mighty magnate and the king eventually emerged. The relationship between them finally collapsed in 921, when Charles favored a courtier named Hagano, whom the West Frankish nobility viewed as an upstart outsider. At an assembly, Charles publicly, symbolically elevated Hagano to Robert's level by placing him on his left, provoking...
This is the thing. You've got somebody like Robert who has been loyal and faithful and has fought for you and won victories for you and could easily be claiming it for yourself. Man, you do not tick that guy off. You don't do anything to damage that relationship.
Outrage. Robert joined the opposition and was crowned anti-king in 923. War erupted, and although Robert's forces prevailed, he himself was killed in battle. Charles was captured
But his line has been established as being able to inherit those titles now.
by Heribert II of Vermandois, sidelined and used as political leverage, while a third-party compromise candidate, Rudolph of Burgundy, was elected king. Robert's son, Hugh the Great, inherited his vast territories stretching from the Loire to the Seine, along with numerous abbeys. Despite his power, Hugh declined the crown, recognizing that great power in one's own vast possessions did not guarantee that one could prevail against the other magnates and princes or count on their support once crowned king. Hugh retained his holdings and gained even more influence, eventually controlling most of Neustria. Meanwhile, Rudolf of Burgundy was a weak king, with his reign marked by external threats and internal instability. He died childless in 935.
Seems to be going around, dying childless.
Hugh then invited the young Louis IV of the Carolingian family to take the throne in 936. This Louis was known as d'Outremont, as he had, in his youth, gone into exile in England with his mother. Hugh supported his coronation and was rewarded with the title Duke of the Franks.
And as you see now, we have England, right? So England has been united in the aftermath of Alfred the Great, who worked really hard and again was also playing the long game. Didn't become king of England himself, but his descendants are able to do that much in large part because of the work that he does. And so now we're going to see the same kind of thing happening over here.
However, rivalry emerged. Louis sought to curb Hugh's power, while Hugh allied himself with Otto the Great of East Francia, marrying Otto's sister Hadwig. In 938, Louis and his noble supporters found themselves in direct opposition to the Robertines and their growing power. As his first and most important project, the king now sought to win Lotharingia, to establish a new Carolingian power base there.
Isn't it interesting that what we know today as Alsace and Lorraine, which was then called Lotharingia, is for the next 1,000 years going to be fought over between what is now Germany and France. It's the region that was taken during the Franco-Prussian War. It's the region that's given back to France after World War I. This is going to be the site of so much bloodshed for 1,000 years.
However, this made Otto the Great his enemy. By 940, the attempt to conquer Lotharingia, alongside rebellious dukes, had achieved the opposite of what had been hoped for. Instead of a new power base, Louis found his enemies united against him, and Otto's troops invaded West Francia. It was only Louis's marriage to Gerberga, another sister of Otto, that saved the situation from utter disaster. The conflict between Hugh and his king continued to drag on, with shifting alliances culminating in the great magnate's excommunication in 947 and 948. Under pressure...
And this is the kind of thing that after Charlemagne especially you start to see more and more, is the Pope's involvement and the Church's involvement in these what are otherwise secular disagreements, so to speak, where the Church is going to get involved in recognizing rulers and is going to be the one who crowns rulers, much like what happened with Charlemagne in 800. So now they have legitimized one another. The Church has legitimized the state, and the state has legitimized the Church.
From the Church, Louis IV and Otto the Great, who now intervened to support Louis, Hugh finally submitted to his king and paid him homage in 953. After long struggles, Louis finally had his own center of power within the fortress of Lyon and the city of Reims, and had asserted his position against the magnates, mostly by pitting them against each other. But by the late summer 954, the king died. Louis's son, Lothar, came to power largely through the efforts of his mother, Gerberga. She enlisted the help of her brothers, Otto the Great and Bruno, the Archbishop of Cologne. The latter was to serve as regent for Lothar until his own death in 965, and ruled the West Frankish Empire in accordance with Otto I's wishes. So, once again, the greatest magnate of West Francia refrained from reaching for the crown himself.
It's really, really impressive that this particular bloodline, that they are so... they're not as aggressive as one might think about a bloodline that's going to come to power and rule France for the next 900 years.
Once again, Hugh supported Lothar, a young king, and was rewarded for it. Burgundy and Aquitaine were given to him before he died of illness in Verdun in 956, leaving behind 3 sons. After Hugh's death, the Robertines' position suddenly became unclear. Hugh's eldest son, Hugo Capet, inherited his father's position and retained power over the family's core possessions. However, the king extended his status as a minor, thus not granting him control of key possessions and titles. Some of Hugo Capet's subordinate nobles did not recognize the rule of their rightful overlord, while others came into conflict with each other. It was not until 960 that King Lothar allowed Hugo Capet to fully assume his father's inheritance. He was appointed Duke of the Franks and Margrave of Neustria, but on condition that he recognized the independence of the local counts. Furthermore, the king gave the parts of the Kingdom of Burgundy that the Robertines had acquired to Hugo's brother, after Hugo Capet and King Lothar together fought against rebellious nobles in that region. But King Lothar himself found himself increasingly under the control of the Ottonians. It was not until the death of Otto the Great in 973 that Lothar had the opportunity to break out and began to bring Lorraine back under the influence of Western France.
I mean, if you're named Lothar, it feels kind of obvious, doesn't it, that you're going to want to take Lotharingia for yourself, the namesake that gave the region its name.
This led to open war between East and West in 978. Hugo Capet supported his king in the conflict because his family had interests in the region that were threatened by Ottonian initiatives. In a coup, Lothar succeeded in occupying Aachen, the capital of the Eastern Empire, and plundering it for 5 days. The king of the West Franks turned Charlemagne's eagle, housed in the palace, to face east as a symbolic insult to Otto II. The East struck back fast and hard. Otto's troops invaded West Francia without encountering much resistance, plundering.
Doesn't matter if you can take and plunder an area if you can't hold on to it, right? All you've done is you maybe get some goodwill for your troops by getting them a bunch of loot, but now, you've advanced too far, you've depleted yourself, you've weakened yourself, and now you've opened yourself up to an invasion.
Country, and revealing Lothar's weak position within his realm. Otto II then installed his cousin, Charles, Lothar's brother, as anti-king in West Francia, and began besieging Paris. The siege was eventually brought to an end by illness, the approaching winter, and a relief army led by Hugo Capet.
How long is Hugo going to be second fiddle when he's the guy that's really winning the victories?
Otto II withdrew and suffered most of the losses of this campaign when his rearguard faced a difficult river crossing and was attacked by Hugo Capet's army. Following his great victory over Emperor Otto, Hugo was the hero of the day and could use that victory to secure his position within the realm. Perhaps in the wake of that catastrophic campaign, Lothar installed his son, Louis V, as co-king and successor to the throne of West Francia in 979. This move was supported by Hugo Capet, most likely as he anticipated gaining control over the new king from his position of power early on. But Lothar, on the other hand, could clearly see that Hugo was a threat to his rule, and tried to secure himself against the Capet's ambitions by setting aside his differences with Otto II. In 980, the West Frankish king married his 15-year-old son Louis to Adelheid of Anjou, without consulting Hugo Capet, bringing her possessions under royal control and thus pincering the possessions of the Robertines. However, as Adelheid was in her 40s, the marriage was not to last long. Just 2 years later, she separated from her teenage husband. But another opportunity opened for Lothar when Otto II died young in 983 while in Italy. His son, Otto III, was a minor of 7 years.
This is always, look throughout history. If you want to see something that rhymes in history, it's that bad things happen to your realm when the heir to the throne is a child and they inherit.
Guidance of his mother, Theophany, and his grandmother, Adelheid. The Ottonian realm was plunged into further insecurity when other parties kidnapped the young Otto. Lothar wanted to gain...
Again, rhyming through history, right? This is one of the reasons why a child ruler is such a bad thing, because whoever controls him can potentially control the empire, control the realm, control the kingdom, control whatever it might be. And all the while, you have somebody like Hugo who's lying in the wings, who is powerful and very qualified, but has always played second fiddle to other people while it all plays out. And he's going to pounce when he gets the opportunity.
In this situation, and tried to bring parts of Lotharingia under West Frankish control. Hugo Capet also saw the situation as an opportunity, and began to improve his relations with the Ottonians by supporting both empresses against claims from other candidates on the Ottonian throne. In 985, Lothar tried to capture Upper Lotharingia by force, with some success, but Hugo did not support his king, remaining steady on his own pro-Ottonian cause. As Lothar could not begin an open conflict with Hugo, the struggle against the Ottonians raged on, again showing the limits of the late Carolingian dynasty's power. Lothar died suddenly the next year, and his son, Louis, did not survive him all too long.
There's your opportunity. There is the vacuum of power that Hugo can step into.
Sudden death on the 22nd of May, 987, in a hunting accident. The last Carolingian on the West Frankish throne died. But within this short rule, Hugo laid bare the power structure in the West Frankish kingdom when he intervened in the trial against Archbishop Adalbero of Reims, who was accused of high treason in 986 for being a loyal supporter of Ottonian interests in West Francia. The assembly at Compiègne, which was to decide on the archbishop, was dissolved when Hugo appeared with a host of soldiers. Unsurprisingly, the archbishop proposed, with the support of a cadre of other nobles, that Hugo Capet should succeed Louis as the king of West Francia.
There you go. I mean, this is just from start to finish, this dynasty over these couple of generations has played the long game, has played it well, has recognized when to act and when not to, when to show humility, when to let other people be the one in charge. Now this vacuum opens up. There's no legitimate claimant in the West among the Carolingians. There's no real strong threat to Hugo. He gets the church on his side. He's opportunistic. He waits for that chance. He takes it.
The Imperial Ottonians found him a viable option, because he was a relative and supporter of theirs. A meeting was convened in Senlis, where Hugo was elected. Only Charles of Lorraine emerged as an opponent for the crown. However, Charles had few supporters among the West Frankish nobility, the clergy, or the Ottonians. He had alienated them all in the past. When he invoked his right of inheritance, Archbishop Adalbero publicly opposed this candidate in a speech. He called Charles a troublemaker, without honor, faith, or character. Furthermore, he had married below his station. If the West Franks wanted an era of prosperity, they should place the crown on Hugo, the illustrious Duke of the Franks.
Because he can legitimately say, listen, I'm a man of honor who hasn't done anything out of just psychotic ambition. I have stayed loyal until the opportunity presented itself where I could be of service to the kingdom, where I could rise up and offer myself, because there's really nobody else out there anyway, so I'm not usurping anyone. I mean, there's so much to be said for how they've played this.
Just a half year later, his son was crowned co-ruler, laying the foundations of a new dynasty. As we have seen, the rise of the Capetians was not the result of a sudden power grab, but a slow and careful accumulation of influence and power.
Smart.
But in the end, still far from a position of hegemony. For decades, the crown passed between Carolingians and Robertines as legitimacy, compromise, and pragmatism shaped political decisions. In the end, Hugo Capet prevailed not because he was overwhelmingly powerful, but because no major faction stood firmly against him. From these modest beginnings, the Capetian dynasty would shape France's future for centuries to come.
Kings and Generals always does a great job. I learned a lot there. I think it's a fascinating time. If you know more about this topic and you want to add to the conversation, use the comment section below to do that. I want to thank Justin Davis and Daniel M. for your support on Patreon. Check out these other videos. Thanks so much.